So when we look at the Middle Ages in Europe, you almost have to look at it kind of in two halves because in the first half of the Middle Ages, much of Western Europe is struggling. And so when we look at the economy during the first half, agriculture production lagged behind. It suffered from repeated invasions like the Viking and Magyar invasions. It suffered from limited technology. A lot of the technology that they were using was outdated and not really good for the soils in Western Europe. They would develop heavier plows that's going to open up new lands, but overall agriculture production was relatively low. Also, because the agriculture production was low, there really wasn't enough surplus to support things like a growing population or large cities. And so, for the most part, what we see in Western Europe were small, self sufficient towns and manors. And overall, trade was rather limited. It's not until the second half of the Middle Ages that we really start to see trade develop. And we'll look more at that down the road. All right, this was also, in many ways, an age of faith. And the church was the one thing in Western Europe that truly served as a unifying force. Whereas politically, they were fragmented and divided into many different kingdoms. Religiously, most of Western Europe belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. And so that served as kind of a unifying force. And Christians were expected to tithe. The church had a great amount of power. The church owned vast amounts of land, and none of that land, nor the church themselves, could be taxed. And so these churches become extremely powerful, more powerful than most of the kings in Western Europe, and they also become extremely wealthy. One similarity that we see in Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire is the development of these monasteries. And so in the Byzantine Empire, we saw St. Basil, who helped kind of create a code for the monasteries to follow. Similarly, we're going to see St. Benedict create a set of regulations for monasteries in the West. And so under these regulations, it emphasized things like poverty, living a very simple lifestyle, and chastity and obedience to God. And much like in the Byzantine Empire, these monasteries provided services that these towns and cities weren't providing. And so they served as inns, they served as shelters for travelers and places where the poor could go and get help. And they served as orphanages and sometimes hospitals as well. Now, one key difference between the monasteries in the Byzantine Empire and those in the western part of Europe was that these monasteries were also centers of learning. We had no state-sponsored education system in Western Europe, and so most of your educated population could be found in the church in these monasteries.